And we are back on Cape Ann today with Erika Brown of the Manchester Cricket, or thecricket.com if you want to subscribe and follow all of the news going on in Manchester and Essex. Thanks for joining us again, Erika.
Hey guys. Heather, it's good to see you again.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Yeah.
Erika, there's a lot going on now, right? We have a new development in the 40B project.
Yes, that was probably the biggest news of the week for sure. And it's been anticipated for several weeks, like maybe the last month. I want to know, we've talked about the 40B maybe once, right? Once,
yeah,
this whole time.
once, I think.
It's covered sort of week by week in the cricket by, Greg Fetterspiel, the town administrator, sort of gives the factual what's going on with the 40B. And the reason why I don't lean into it is because frankly, my husband's family was connected with the sale of the property. So I don't want to lean in. I don't want the cricket to be a part of the controversy. So now, I guess I can say something about it because it's off the BOS's plate. And that was the big news this week. So essentially what happened technically, because there wasn't a vote by the BOS on Tuesday night, what happened was that the developer called SLV, everybody knows it from all the pink signs everywhere. That's going to be a recycling nightmare when the time comes, but whatever. SLV and Jeff Engler, I think they withdrew their application for the LIP, which is the local initiative project, is what it's technically called. And they essentially removed themselves from negotiating with the BOS, and that's it. So they're done. They have been talking for 6 months, trying to work out sort of something that's called a friendly 40B. And to remind you what the 40B is, we've talked about this before. 40B, because we had to distinguish it between 40R, which was like the 40s, which is what I call it. The 40B is essentially a 40 or 50-year-old state law that punishes, is one way to look at it, or it rewards developers and punishes towns that have continually and stubbornly stayed under a 10% acceptable line for affordable housing in their town. And it's interesting. Town of Manchester has a history of I'll say this about Manchester has a really strong history of having people who year by year stayed on the issue of environmental causes and open space and just really nurturing and being good advocates for that issue in town, which is really, really important. Manchester hasn't had that same focus on being a good advocate and for affordable housing. And as a result, like many towns, they're at 5% instead of 10. So it opened up the town to a developer coming in and saying, we are going to provide some affordable housing. 25% of our project will be affordable. And as a result, if you hit 25%, what happens is they essentially skip right to the state laws for regulating environment, the DEP, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, and all these other kind of things. Any kind of regulation that is specific to a town, like Manchester will say, we don't like it to just be this. We want to add some regulations to customize it for our town and our community because we think that's appropriate. All of those customized things can be tossed out the window if a developer comes in and says, I'm going to provide affordable housing, and the state protects them to some degree. They say, you can't lose money on it. It has to be economically viable. And the reason why they tuck that into it is because a lot of these regulations will make a developer, make them do things that will be expensive, and therefore they know it's not going to be worth their while. So that's what's happened. So they've been negotiating with the BOS, not because the BOS wants it, even though it's called an endorsement. They were seeking an endorsement for a friendly 40B. And it's not an endorsement, and it's unfair to characterize it as that because it's unfair to the BOS because the BOS didn't go looking for this, and and if they were given a choice, they wouldn't endorse it in terms of language that you and I use. But in a legal term, an endorsement means that they would try to get as much mitigation out of a developer for the town in exchange for not being unfriendly and fighting it. So that's what they were trying to do. And they had negotiated right up until this week, they had negotiated $1.5 million worth of goods, things, tangible things, fire truck, donations to affordable housing, all these other things. But on top of that, on top of the 1.5 million, they were also going to get things that are kind of priceless, but not about money. So one of the things was, instead of a 4-story building, the developer would have done a 3-story building. Now that doesn't, how do you price that? But that was a big deal, actually. Also, he was going to do the same number of 1-bedrooms on a percentage basis, instead of, sorry about that, guys. On a percentage basis, they were going to go with a higher units, but lower 1-bedrooms, which would have had fewer children in the school system, which would be less expensive to the town. And it's ugly to kind of think about sort of those nasty kids, they're so expensive. But, unfortunately, that's part of the equation. Right. So that's the whole background. So here's what happened.
Yeah.
What happened was they withdrew. And SLV is no longer, if they come back, which they'll go to the state now, I guess, I don't know. If they come back, they're going to bypass the BOS and go to the ZBA, and it's considered hostile. I have no idea. They may choose not to come back.
Right.
So Erika, what was the breaking point for SLV? Why did they, from what I read in the Gloucester Times, they just basically walked out of the Zoom meeting after 40 minutes.
It was fascinating to me, because they spent 6 months talking about all the tangible things, listing shuttles and sidewalks and, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they never got to it. You want to know why?
Why?
Because, and I'm fascinated, this is the $10 million question that I would want to know, just as a curious observer. In the end, it ended up being a clause, like a clause in the contract that the developer said, I can't do that. And I don't know when it was introduced. I don't know if it was introduced late in the game, if it was some clever move by the BOS, or if it was always there and the developer just, I don't know, never noticed it. But it was a clause that, from my listening to it, it sounded like what I would call a poison pill clause, like a poison pill, which would be like, if they got to the ZBA suddenly had the right to deny it without appeal. And the developer said, I can't do that.
Yeah, right.
And so what was interesting was they never got to the fire trucks. They never got to the 3 stories. They never got to all the stuff they've been talking about. It seemed to me like it was something that they should have figured out right from the beginning. It's kind of like dating somebody and realizing, they don't want kids and I want kids. Or, isn't that something you should have brought up at the very beginning?
Right.
Yeah, but they didn't. And so it became a non-starter. The whole meeting, it was only John Whitten, the town council, who spoke with the developer. The BOS really never spoke except for Eli Bowling. God bless the BOS, by the way, with what they've had to do in the last 6 months. They've done an amazing job, and they really deserve a lot of credit. But they never had to speak, because it was this, almost like it was this dead on arrival issue that was a non-starter, and that's what did it.
So where do they go from here? SLV.
They don't go anywhere.
But
the BOS is happily done.
Yeah, they're done. But then the SLV goes to the state and starts negotiating with the state,
potentially, right?
Potentially. We don't know. So we'll see. But yeah, it's over with the BOS, which means it's not really, and even, by the way, even if it goes to the ZBA, I would imagine it becomes it's a less subjective process. It's more about literally science, regulations, numbers, and that kind of thing. It's a technical process. It doesn't feel so ugly and personal, which is what it's been for the last 6 months.
Right. But in this case, SLV will go through that process, but Manchester loses all those benefits that they would have done with the friendly 40B arrangement.
What happened really was the BOS said, if you go to this clause, this kind of poison pill clause, it meant that the BOS the ZBA could have denied it, and it would knock it down to the safe harbor number, which is 136. And I imagine if they had done it with a friendly, it would have been, the ZBA could knock it down, but they still owed all the goodies. And so I would imagine, as a developer, I'd be like, wait a minute, if I go to the state, I get 136. If I go with you, I run the risk of going to 136, but I still got to pay the goodies. So that's really what it came down to. What I found most interesting is John Whitten, the night before in the BOS, because there were 2 BOS meetings. There was a Monday night regular meeting, and then Tuesday was just about SLV and the 40B. And on Monday night, John Whitten said, my professional opinion is to go unfriendly is to be very, very risky. That was his quote, very, very risky for the town, because the town really, and then to see that the BOS just, they went risky. they went unfriendly. So maybe they know something we don't know. And that's the way it is. I'm just happy that everyone is relieved, I think, that it's going its own way.
Well, so Erika, do you want to touch upon Powder House Hill at all?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Actually, it's kind of been a related thing, but it's definitely on a different track. So 2 trains on the track. And Powder House Hill, there is a group, and it's funny. It's Nancy Hammond and the
Leslie Hammond
campaign. Oh yeah, God. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Nancy Hammond she's in the Housing Authority, and she is the head of the Council on Aging in Manchester. That's Nancy Hammond. This is Leslie Hammond. Leslie Hammond.
Right.
Leslie Hammond is the chair of it's called the Capital Campaign for the Preservation of Manchester Affordable Housing. I had to actually read that because it was too much of a mouthful. It doesn't roll off the tongue. So they have raised $1.2 million in pledges to purchase a 29-unit downtown existing apartment building from the Coburn family, who's owned it for years. It's right downtown. It's perfect for low-income housing. It's what would be called naturally occurring affordable housing, because it's just not formalized affordable housing. It's just priced. It's mid-priced. So it's filled with people who have good deals on their apartments and have for a long time. And there are a lot of apartments in Manchester, actually, that would qualify as that if it were a qualification. So what this group has done is they've partnered with the North Shore. It's the NC, oh my God, it's a Danvers development company headed up by Mickey Northcutt is the guy's name. He actually has shown up on a couple meetings. And his group is out of Danvers, and they only do affordable developments. That's what they do. State connected affordable units, low income primarily, which is state registered housing.
They have that great development in Salem called The Point, right?
Yes. And they are also doing, Corey, I think you talked about a while ago, Cameron's with Action Inc.
They are, yeah.
They're partnering with that. Very creative,
very soon,
actually.
Yeah.
It's creative because usually you think of housing, low income housing as sort of these big projects, and Cameron's would be a spot project, like something that's, maybe, I doubt there's more than 12 units in there, is there?
No.
There's more than that.
There's
more
than that.
Yeah.
Okay. God, Cameron's. Anyway,
the days.
So, but anyway, so back to Powder House Hill, which is on Elton Street in Manchester. They're looking to purchase that. Now they've got to actually, we haven't covered it for the paper, even though we cover a lot of things with the Affordable Housing Trust. They want to actually donate this to the town and give it to the Affordable Housing Trust. But there's a big difference. There's a lot of water between, or whatever they say, a lot of distance between a pledge and money. So I wanted to wait until it actually closed to cover it, but it looks like it's going to close, and it's going to close later on this month. And then, well, they're getting the money later this month, and then they're going to close early in May, I believe it is. And that's an interesting project, is it's low income housing is where the power for that is, because the difference, I mean, low income housing would be, they look at your income and then they decide what your rent is. That's like the housing authority stuff. So if you're older and you're on Social Security or a pension, you can't get charged over a certain percentage of your income. So it protects that. That's low income. Affordable housing would be a percentage of the average median income in an area. And that's usually 80% and down. The debaters say they'd like it to be 50, advocates for affordable housing. But it's in that range. And that's the state, that's affordable housing. So that's AMI region, as opposed to low income, which is about how much money do I make and what can I afford? And therefore I get a guarantee, and that's what's going to happen. And that'll be really, I'll tell you, that'll be great news, because we've talked about this a lot. Manchester has a housing mix problem, and it has an affordable housing problem. And this is a big deal. And the Affordable Housing Trust has been trying for 2.5 years, working judiciously against a plan that, and this can actually probably help them with that plan. But let's stay tuned. Let's see.
So important questions there, though. Will that meet the 10% quota for the 40B? No.
I do not know. I think for some people, that's the $10 million question. And for
Right.
other people, they're just happy to not look the gift horse in the mouth and say, we need affordable housing, and this is good for affordable housing.
Right.
So we don't know.
We have just about a minute or two left. You want to talk about Jim Benke's latest piece?
Yes, Jim Benke is, he's our nature writer, and he kind of writes for us in the season. So he's back, and he wrote about the alewife. Are you familiar with the alewives?
Oh, yeah.
We certainly are.
Otherwise known as, I learned this from Jim Benke's article, the potato chip of the sea. Because they're so plentiful. They're small river herring that are indigenous to sort of the Alewife Brook, which is, Alewife Brook is kind of a weird brook because it's up in Ipswich up here, but then it's also down towards Boston. But
a lot of alewives around, yeah.
Yes, so Alewife Brook in Ipswich, and it ends, I believe, at Chabaco Lake, which is where they do a lot of spawning. And they've historically had a lot of problems with dams. Dams are really what screw up the population and disrupt them. But there are no dams in Essex where they end. The dams are associated with these mills that were in Ipswich, which I learned from the Ipswich Historical Museum and the Saltonstall family, which is local to Manchester. But they were once plentiful, and now they are in danger, and there is a group of people and organizations that are trying to save them. But they're very beautiful. They're they're an amazing and threatened species, and they have a really big, important part of our history. Jim was able to work with Jim Witham from the executive director of the Essex Shipbuilding Museum. He's lovely. And he got some great pictures and images of old images of harvesting alewives, and they're beautiful. So it's a good piece, and it's just a big, rich piece. It feels good to read.
There you go, folks. Get yourself a copy of The Cricket. I know I'm due for mine, I think, tomorrow by the mail, Erika.
Yes.
Have a good weekend.
All righty.